Hello, I'm Chookie, and today we are going to talk about what happens when your brain decides to act up in the most bizarre ways possible.
Bruh.
And try to understand the neurology behind it. Also subscribe to the channel while you're still doing fine. Syndrome 1. Paris Syndrome. This condition affects primarily Japanese tourists, and the reason is deeply specific. In Japanese popular culture, advertising, anime, film, literature, Paris has been constructed as an almost mythological place. A city of effortless glamour, impeccable manners, and constant romantic lighting. Same story is told over and over for decades. And then the tourist arrives and finds that the Parisian metro is crowded, occasionally smells concerning, and the people are rude in a way that feels personally targeted. But it is, in fact, just a Tuesday in Paris, and people are, well, just French. So the tourists start hallucinating and feel like they are being persecuted. Two women develop the specific delusion that their hotel room was bugged and that a conspiracy was being organized against them, which is actually a reasonable concern if you've ever dealt with a Parisian hotel Wi-Fi. But this situation has a very specific neuroscience behind it. Your brain has a region called the anterior cingulate cortex. Think of it as your brain's error detector. Its job is to scan for mismatches between what you expected and what you got. It is, neurologically speaking, the part of your brain that fires when you meet someone from your dating app for the first time, and they are not quite who you thought they would be.
Huh?
Now, if it's a small mismatch, the anterior cingulate flags it, and the prefrontal cortex, which is your rational brain, adjusts the expectation and life moves on. But here the mismatch wasn't small. The tourists have built a whole city in their head, brick by brick, and it was a masterpiece. The reality, however, was a soggy croissant served by a rude man who thinks your hair is too dry. Japan runs on omotenashi, hospitality so intense it feels like the staff has taken a sacred oath to anticipate your needs before you even become aware of them. To a nervous system calibrated to Japanese social norms, a Parisian waiter's neutral face reads as hostility. The anterior cingulate cortex, already firing errors about the city itself, now starts firing errors about every human interaction. The result is a cascade. The brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, gets recruited. Cortisol and adrenaline start signaling your body is under severe crisis mode. The prefrontal cortex, sleep-deprived, jet-lagged, culturally disoriented, and now running a sustained background error signal, runs out of capacity to regulate. Now the emotional brain runs the show. Think of it like martial law. Unchecked, the amygdala starts finding threats everywhere. The hotel staff are watching every movement. The strangers must be talking about you. The room is definitely bugged. These thoughts are just brain trying to find a narrative that explains all the big feelings inside you. Unsafe, anxious, in danger, panicking. The mechanism that produces Paris Syndrome is the same mechanism that produces every paranoid thought you have ever had on a sleepless, stressful day in an unfamiliar environment. When you're taken to the doctor, they tell you the treatment is actually quite simple. Go back home. And the symptoms resolve almost entirely upon return to Japan. Syndrome 2, Jerusalem Syndrome. Now, Paris Syndrome is caused by a city not living up to the idea. Jerusalem Syndrome is caused by a city living up to the idea so completely, so overwhelmingly, that certain brains cannot contain what that means. Meet David.
Huh?
David is a 43-year-old accountant from Ohio. He is not, by any standard clinical measure, mentally ill. He pays taxes, coaches his daughter's soccer team, and has been religious his entire life. Not this. This. So he flies to Jerusalem. The first day, he tours the Old City. He walks the same stones that, by his reckoning, some of the most significant figures in the history of the world once walked. He stands at the Western Wall for a long time and finally touches it. Something happens. He can't quite describe it. But it's a feeling of recognition so intense, it doesn't feel like emotion. It's almost tangible. Like information. Like being told real-world secrets. By day 2, David has stopped sleeping and separated from his tour group. His wife calls, but he doesn't answer. This isolation is actually an important symptom, and tour guides are trained to notice and report it. By day 3, David is standing in the old city in improvised white robes, delivering a sermon, to whoever will listen to it. He is not having a breakdown in the way we commonly picture one. He's actually unusually calm, and for some reason believes he is Jesus. Jerusalem Syndrome was first clinically described in the 1930s. About 100 tourists experience it every year in Jerusalem. 40 require hospitalization. So what is actually happening? Your brain has a network called the default mode network. It's active when you're not focused on an external task. When you're daydreaming, self-reflecting, or doing the fundamental human thing of asking, who am I? What does my life mean? Where do I fit in the story of everything?
Huh?
Normally, your prefrontal cortex acts as the editor of the default mode network. It receives the outputs, the daydreams, the narratives, the identity constructions, and it moderates them. It says, yes, this is meaningful, but you are still an accountant from Ohio. But David has not slept in 2 days. He is in a state of overwhelming emotional activation. His dopamine system, the brain's reward and significance pathway, is firing intensely in response to the sheer accumulated meaning of this environment. And the prefrontal cortex is too exhausted to counter the constant fantasies. The default mode network's identity construction is no longer edited, so it goes to its logical conclusion given the data available. The remarkable thing, and this is what separates Jerusalem Syndrome from psychosis in the clinical sense, is that it resolves when David leaves. Get him on a plane, give him 48 hours, and David the accountant is back. Syndrome 3, Florence Syndrome. Florence comes for you too and breaks you because it's just too beautiful. Between 1977 and 1986, that's less than a decade, one hospital in Florence admitted 107 tourists for this, transported directly from museums. At least 4 people are known to have collapsed specifically in front of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Yeah, checks out. It is also called Stendhal Syndrome. Stendhal Syndrome is named after the French writer who sat on the floor of Santa Croce in 1817 and had a documented breakdown while looking at frescoes. Here's what's happening in his brain. Normally, your amygdala, that threat detector, evaluates incoming sensory data and answers a single question. Does this matter? Pleasant things get a mild dopamine reward. You move on. And the David, which is 5 meters of Renaissance genius by the most skilled sculptor who ever lived, registers as the most significant object that amygdala has ever encountered. The amygdala, unable to process this as merely pleasant, fires the sympathetic nervous system. Adrenaline floods the bloodstream. Heart rate surges. The visual cortex, already at maximum load processing the sculpture's scale, detail, and perfect anatomical precision, starts misfiring at the edges. And here, the prefrontal cortex should step in and say, you're looking at art. You are safe. But the prefrontal cortex, outcompeted by the combined intensity of the amygdala and the dopamine system, cannot get a word in. And the person experiences pure, unfiltered, unmediated emotional experience before the prefrontal cortex comes back online. Florentines are completely immune to this. The same David, Venus, and the Giotto frescoes have no effect on people who walk past these things every morning on their way to get coffee because of something called habituation. When you encounter something for the first time and it fires an intense response, the amygdala logs as high significance. When you encounter the same thing repeatedly, the amygdala progressively downgrades the response, not because the thing has become less beautiful, but because the brain has confirmed, again and again, that it is not a crisis. This is, fascinatingly, the exact same mechanism that underpins clinical exposure therapy for phobias. Again, if you put them on a plane and send them back home, they are good as new.
Yay!
The thread running through all of it. Sit with this for a moment. Every single one of these syndromes, when you trace the neuroscience, leads back to the same structure. The same thin, evolutionarily recent, extraordinarily fragile strip of cortex sitting behind your forehead. The prefrontal cortex is what separates being moved by art from having a breakdown in front of it. It's what separates feeling spiritually overwhelmed from declaring yourself a prophet, or worse, starting a podcast about it. It is also, by evolutionary standards, brand new. It was the last major brain structure to develop. It's also the last part to mature, not fully online until your mid-20s. and it is chronically underpowered compared to the ancient limbic system it's supposed to manage. That's all for now. Hope most of you learned something useful to apply in real life, and others learned some really cool info dumps for parties. I love both. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment before you leave to do great things. Until next time.